In the project I'm working on now, I'm doing a lot of waste chopping on some of the joints I'm working on. It's not an uncommon task. I mean, you do it all the time. And the thing is, chopping, getting rid of the end grain, is one of the harshest things you can do to a chisel. So this time I thought I'd try a technique that Frank Straza has been mentioning quite a bit this past few years, and it works shockingly well. So for this video, I thought I'd talk about a few tips that I've used in the past for chopping waste, and you can see the results when you add Frank's technique to it. So come along and let's chop some figure joints. Now, picking the right chisel to use whenever you're chopping out end grain and stuff like that, like when you're mortise, is pretty important. And if I'm doing a mortise for a joint, just a standard mortise and tenon, a quarter or 3/8 inch, stuff like that, this is the tool I'll use. It's got a fairly steep angle because cutting end grain is so brutal. We want a tip that's going to take some real abuse. If you use your standard 25 to 27 degree bevel angle, it'll just roll over and it'll stop cutting, and then you're just kind of crushing the fibers. But whenever I'm cutting finger joints or wide joints like this on the end of stuff, I hate using a narrow chisel like this because it takes forever to do stuff. I will actually use one of the widest chisels I have. This particular one is a 1-incher that I'm going to be using on this one. But I do modify it because my standard angle is, about between 25 and 27 degrees. So if you'll notice, my front bevel right here, as much as I can do, that is hollow ground on my grinder, and that's about 25 degrees. And then I really only sharpen the end of it to get, my 27 or something like that. This is probably a little less than 25. But whenever I'm doing chopping work, if you'll notice, I have a slight micro bevel. You see that little reflection right there? That right there is just steeper than whatever this is, which gives that very edge a lot more robustness. It will take a lot more abuse. And it doesn't take too much more than that. That right there will allow me to use my standard bench chisels and something that's much wider. And I like that wider aspect because I'm registering against the knife line whenever I'm doing this. So the wider the chisel, the easier it is to register in that line. Whereas this right here, it's more likely I'm going to be slightly off, so then my baseline will be jagged. So that's tip number 1 and 2. Use a wide chisel and add that micro bevel. And let me show you how to do that micro bevel. Y'all see my sharpening station. I keep it behind my workbench on a low table right here. It's basically coarse, medium, fine, and super, super fine as far as grits right here. So whenever I'm just adding that little bit of a micro bevel, I'll basically go to fine and super fine, and I will find my angle, and then I'm just going to lift up on the back of the chisel and just drag down, putting a little bit of pressure right there. Just one stroke like that is all it takes. I don't want to remove a whole bunch because my next sharpening, I want to remove that bevel totally. And then I'll come over here and I might do 2. Once again, I'm just getting past what the original bevel was a little bit. I don't really care what it is. And I might take 2 strokes on my super, super, super fine. I've got a slight burr on back. That's what I was looking for. Once you have that burr, you're done, no matter what kind of sharpening you're doing. From there, I'll leave the burr, and when it's fresh off that stone, I will use the stroke that I just keep over on the bench, just one swipe back to somewhat remove that burr. Then as I'm chopping, every few times I'll just come over here and just give it, 5 or 10 strokes, remove the burr on the back, and get back to work. Because that just kind of refreshes that edge every now and then, but it doesn't remove too much metal, so whenever I reset this chisel back to my 25, 27 degrees, it'll only take a few seconds. Now, even though ultimate sharpness isn't as important as just a better geometry when you're chopping into end grains, I do find that the stroping action, giving that slight edge, just makes finding my knife line a lot easier because I can drag it back and it'll click. So if you hear that, it just kind of clicks into that knife line. So I can do it by feel and not necessarily by eye. So I've removed most of my waste with the saw on all these joints right here. I just want to remove that much left. But even with that much, I'll use my third rule. And that's only taking away half the material until it falls into the knife line and you can't take half. So I'm going to walk it up. And the easiest way I do to walk it is I don't pick up my chisel. I will lift one side, another, and literally walk it halfway. And then when I start chopping, the chopping is done lightly until I establish that the chisel is in the wood. So it's just a few light taps. And once I've established it's in the wood, not at the edge, I can take my heavier shots. Now I want you to notice that the chisel is not perfectly in line. It's tilted back ever so slightly. I'm only going about halfway in, and I'm actually going to create a pyramid from the top and bottom. I want the joint to rest against this edge, but if it comes a little bit shallow on the inside right here, I don't really care because end grain doesn't have that much holding power. Most of the holding power is going to be from the long grain glue joint and the both pieces. End grain does have a little bit of holding, but it's just not as important. So to make it easier to find that angle, I stand to the side as I'm chopping. Because if you're standing this way, looking that way, you cannot tell the angle it is here. So that's the next step that I used as standard procedure. A few light taps, and then whale away. And because I had that micro bevel, this edge has not crumbled yet. So next, when I get it, it's very hard to find halfway to the line, I'll just go to the line. The idea behind that is you're leaving little resistance on this side of the joint. Because if you have a lot of resistance over here, the chisel is actually going to want to equalize the pressure on this side, and it will go past your line. So right now, I'm right in my knife line, holding the chisel down low so I can control it, not at the handle. A few light strikes, and then whack away. There we go. And the final ones of my techniques is I don't use the whole chisel whenever I'm going across. I'll actually register this side against that so it drops in the line there and come over. And I'm actually only whacking away with 3/4 of the chisel. I looked at my camera, I missed it a little bit, but that's okay because I'm going to be beveling that. Now, I want you to look at how smooth that is. Now let's add Frank's technique. Frank will mix up about 1/2 grain alcohol, the 190 proof stuff, and water, and he will lightly mist that end grain. Not only does that bring out the knife wall line, makes it easier to see as well as feel, but it soaks in a little bit right where you want to soften the fibers. And the alcohol dries up quicker than water, so you don't have to worry about it. So the idea is we're not only softening the fibers, we are also highlighting our knife line. And it really does work. See, I chopped in right there, and you can tell the fibers just inside are slightly wet, but I haven't gone all the way to the knife wall yet. It's dry right there. So it softened the fibers that needed to be softened and didn't really touch the rest. Really cool idea, and I'll continue working on it on this trip to show you the difference, but you do get a smoother result. The drunk grain is easier to shave too. Well, I guess that makes sense. It is softer. So thanks, Frank, for the tip for making chopping a little bit easier. See, alcohol in the shop is a good thing. Sort of. Y'all be safe, have fun, and remember, it's always worth the effort to learn, create, share with others. Oh, and hey, for today's bonus, I want to talk about Doug Stowe. A lot of y'all probably recognize that name if you've been around woodworking for a long time, because he's written some really fantastic books. Here too, I quickly picked off my shelf, one on making tables, but this one on box making was practically a Bible to me when I first started out woodworking, and I think that's where most people recognize the name as a phenomenal box making teacher. Well, guess what? He has had a YouTube channel for quite a while now, doesn't have very many subscribers, and what's cool about it is if you go back in the videos that he's uploaded, he doesn't upload very often, but he's actually gotten publishing rights to a lot of his old DVDs, and he's kind of broken out the chapters in those DVDs into little videos. Really phenomenal information. You can tell production quality has gone up over the years, but you cannot, I mean, the quality of the material hasn't. I mean, his is just above and beyond what you're seeing out there. So I'll put a link down in the description to his YouTube channel. Definitely, that's one you need to go subscribe to.